So the first speaker is Benjamin Silvester from the University of Stavanger, who's going to talk to us about exactly this conflict or complementarity between Norway and Europe, the rest of Europe. So Benjamin, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, can everyone hear me and see me?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. Okay. Just start recording my my talk. Oh, I don't have permission to record at the moment, so okay. Okay. So everyone can hear me and see me? Okay. My name is Benjamin Silvester. I'm ESR number 14. I'm based at the University of Stavanger in Norway. And the title of my project is Policy Framework Interactions for Cross-Border Cooperation and Energy System Transitions, although it's changed a little bit as I've conducted my research. Oh, yeah, okay. So the central focus of my PhD and consequently this presentation will be the role of politics and policy in energy transitions and the barriers and constraints to cross-border cooperation and energy system transition, with a primary focus on Norway, which seems very relevant to the discussion that's emerging, and its interactions with Europe and North Sea states for primarily achieving cross-border electricity interconnection. The presentation theme I've been given is Norway versus the EU, but it's both one with conflict and also collaboration, so it could rather be Norway and the EU. Presentation content is first on the importance of the political landscape, the second on why political feasibility is important, the third on why a relational approach is key to understanding the Norwegian state, and the fourth is on what I perceive to be the disconnect between Norway, North Sea states and the EU. The two latter parts of the presentation are a lot shorter than the first two. So my research contributes to what's been called the political turn in socio-technical transitions and energy studies. And that essentially is the recognition that policy and politics is a bit more important than has previously been given attention to. And my research focuses on developing this idea of a political landscape. A political landscape is something most of us have heard of or have a rough idea of, but it's not really something that's been given a lot of kind of a physical structure or nature. And so the political landscape is a site of negotiation and conflict where formal and informal apparatus of politics meet to interpret events and what they mean for regimes, niches, and to a large extent, other landscape actors. So the reason that it's important is because it's not really the role of scientists to tell society what should be done. And this was something that was said by the first chairman of the International Panel on Climate Change, Bert Bolin. He said that's the role of politicians and society. So it's the political landscape that plays a very significant role in interpreting what I refer to as major landscape developments like climate change, economic shocks, and pandemics, and what they mean for society, the economy, regimes, energy companies, and niches, the nascent technology, and importantly, help to decide what should be done. So one way of viewing this is to think of socio-technical systems as occurring along three levels. Now, this image is from Frank Gill's work on the multi-level perspective. At the bottom, you have niche innovations, which are small networks of actors, new technologies that are still developing. In the center, you have the socio-technical regime, established energy incumbents and companies. And at the top, you have the socio-technical landscape, which is the physical infrastructure of society and also kind of exogenous, so kind of everything else is within that. So I contribute by developing what I refer to as the political landscape and embedding this within a socio-technical view of transitions. So how does this work? You know, climate change is a landscape development. It comes and it confronts us with a whole host of different problems, but it doesn't tell us what should be done for society, or how we should interpret climate change, how we should interpret the energy transition that's required. Well, the political landscape comes in and actors and institutions within that debate and they fight, and the winners of these debates interpret some of the consequences. And the political landscape can choose to protect or expose regimes and niches to different circumstances. Equally, regime actors can react positively or negatively to these decisions and attempt to lobby and use their power and financial resources to change policymakers' minds and politicians. And equally, niches are impacted by the decisions made by this political landscape. They can also react positively or negatively, but they don't have as much power as regimes. So why is this important to Norway and its interconnection with North Sea states in Europe? Well, Norway is still interpreting what climate change means and the consequence it has for its economy and society. And so currently there's a tremendous reluctance to move away from oil and gas. It's actually pushing gas as a transition fuel. But this is being challenged within the political landscape, and there are significant conflicts brewing within it. And it's starting to fight over electricity resources now. And the axis of divide is a battle over domestic versus cross-border electricity resources. About 80% of the debate is on domestic utilization. Cross-border isn't such a large part of the debate within the political landscape at the moment, but it is starting to be. And it's important to understand that the reason why this political landscape is important is because the Norwegian state has a monopoly over hydropower transmission and most generation sites in Norway. So the state is incredibly important in determining what happens to those resources, more so than in a number of other countries. The question remains, who will be the winners and losers in this conflict? A new election has occurred in Norway and there's a new government forming. But what's interesting, and is perhaps unfortunate, the timing for ENSYSTRA, is huge pressure is now coming to Europe. And I think this is a very interesting time for this debate about interconnection and the energy transition, because we could be entering a type of kind of winter of discontent for European power. So at the center of this discussion over energy transitions is a focus on feasibility. But there's a huge amount of focus on techno-economic feasibility as the most important determinants of transition, and not enough on the role of political feasibility. And I think the Norwegian case and others show that politics is absolutely vital to this. It is understandable. Political feasibility is incredibly difficult to engage with and measure, let alone predict. And the reason why this is a problem is there's a lot of feasibility analysis that is conducted from a techno-economic perspective. And that typically confers that technological feasibility plus economic feasibility equals that something is politically feasible. However, this is often not correct. Technology and economics are incredibly important, and they have a substantial impact on political feasibility. But political feasibility is its own thing. Just because something is very technologically efficient or cost effective does not mean that you will get the support of society, policymakers or politicians. It helps, but it is not the thing that confers that something will happen. And I think history, history is littered with many examples of this. Different transitions have different feasibility components. And so you could view the perfectly balanced kind of ideal transition as one as having equal components of feasibility. Equally, some where you have a technology that's very good, but economically it's not cost effective, politically it's not supported. Sometimes, although rare, you might have a situation where economically something makes sense, but technologically and politically it doesn't. And in other cases, something is more politically feasible than it is techno-economically feasible. Maybe CCS would be a good example of this, that is very strongly backed politically in Norway, but techno-economically is still developing. Political feasibility is about barriers and hurdles, constraints. And so to overcome these constraints, you need to satisfy multiple barriers and hurdles and get over these along different societal political lines. In the Norwegian case of installing substantially more electricity interconnectors than is currently planned to meet these decarbonisation targets, it is political feasibility that is the most lacking. And it's very difficult to see how, in the short term, these can be overcome, because they concern price concerns and the utilization of electricity to meet domestic targets. So in the interconnector debate, the technology is already there. It can be developed further, but it's pretty well established with regards to interconnectors. Grids can develop more, can handle bigger loads, etc. But it's already pretty there. Economically, it makes sense to produce this in the macroeconomic situation in Norway, but there are significant concerns over price increases for consumers and industry. And this leads to a situation where politically unions, which are extremely powerful in Norway, and other actors are quite against a more interconnected Norway. So why is interconnection experiencing such a low level of political feasibility in Norway? Well, in order to answer this, you need to understand the Norwegian state, its model, and how the state reflects the societal economic factors within Norway and the relationships that exist within it. So a relational approach seems to be the best way to understand this. And this assumes that the state is a reflection of society, economics, and politics. In essence, it's not autonomous from society and economics that other state theories would argue. So using the following approach, I won't speak too much on this. I've identified a number of important state actors and institutions and interviewed many of them. So far, the important actors concerning electricity interconnection are various ministries, agencies, state-owned organizations, and companies in Norway. What's interesting is 3 ministries are important in particular: the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy, and the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and the Ministry of Climate and Environment. What's interesting is these ministries appear to have very different views on interconnection and are contesting renewable energy resources for different industry interests. They represent different aspects of society. But there's a conflict brewing here, and it's beginning to emerge in Norway and beginning to come into view. Statnett, Statkraft, NVE, unions, and major Norwegian power companies are also engaged in this, and they're very important. I don't have enough time to speak about them individually. But the divergence between these actors, these ministries, and these industry interests and unions is a fight over the utilization of domestic electricity resources first and foremost. And that's a fight over offshore oil platforms and electrification there, electricity for energy-intensive industry, the electrification of transport such as ferries, electricity in order to meet domestic CO2 reduction targets. And this concerns primarily electricity prices. Will they go up, will they go down? And so cross-border energy trade is part of that, but it's not a huge part of the focus of the Norwegian state. And what was interesting about the talk we were given yesterday by Tata Steel was all of the different scenarios that Tata had with regards to the electricity price. Depending on if hydrogen is used or different forms of energy required in industrial processes, dramatically impact the amount of electricity that's utilized. Andre Feij had the example about a factor of 8 if you're using hydrogen for domestic heating. So what the energy mix ends up being will tell us about how much electricity we need and where it should come from. Within this, there's a huge difference in the political party support in Norway. So NorthConnect was suspended, the argument that was given, due to wanting to see what NordLink and North Sea Link do to domestic electricity prices. And they modeled that perhaps the electricity price would go up by 2 or 3 öre with NorthConnect. But that's nothing in comparison to the electricity price increases in Germany and Sweden. But it's a huge point of contention in Norway. Initially, NorthConnect was supported by several parties, but they changed their mind during the process. I spoke to some people behind NorthConnect, and the Progress Party, for example, pledged its support and then pulled out. And there are significant issues over ownership of NorthConnect. Despite the majority of the ownership of NorthConnect being Norwegian municipalities, companies like Lyse, who are municipality majority owned, there's a big difference between the state with a capital S, centralized state, and the state with a small s through communes and municipalities. And these are treated as private entities by some political actors. And so the debate is, does Statnett need to own all of these interconnectors fully? Recently, the Red Party's come out to oppose the opening of North Sea Link due to fears over high electricity prices and wants it delayed. And the Progress Party wants an even higher tax on interconnectors, even though hydro is heavily taxed today, and there's very significant rent on interconnectors. A new coalition government led by the Labour Party, the Centre Party, are unlikely to be more friendly to interconnectors than the previous Conservative coalition government based on previous records. And there's significant concerns over environmental impact on interconnectors and expanding hydro reservoirs with pumped storage, silt movement, and implications for wildlife. So this leads me to begin to conclude. We know the domestic context, but when compared to Europe and North Sea states, there's a bit of a disconnect. All North Sea states either have access, want more, or want to access Norwegian electricity resources. And the European Green Deal, in order to be realised, needs to have a significant level of interconnection. And it views Norway as a key partner. But North Sea states are also starting to realise that they won't get the level of interconnection they want from Norway. Germany, for example, the informants I've spoken to there have said that they fear that they won't have access to Norway to have the sort of energy that they were hoping to have 5 or 10 years ago. UK, Denmark, and Netherlands all have different understandings and ideas of what Norway can provide based on their own domestic context. But seen in the domestic context with the Norwegians, they're not so currently focused on expanding interconnection for exports to Europe over fears of electricity prices, concerns about achieving these targets. Less interconnection from Norway means these countries will have to solve their decarbonisation problems by exploring slightly different pathways, and this leads ultimately to a different energy system developing. And there's also a significant risk that Norway can lose out from not selling its energy with such uncertainty over weather conditions also. It is not as simple to say that prices will increase as a consequence of interconnection, and Norway may well need interconnection for pump storage hydropower to fill its reservoirs after periods of no rain. So in conclusion, the political landscape is key in Norway, but it's also important in North Sea states in Europe. Some are aligned and some are not. Studying and understanding this helps to illuminate the decision-making of states and the behaviour of some political actors and institutions. Political feasibility is a very important part of this equation, but the political feasibility of interconnection expanding beyond current plans is quite low in Norway. It's low because of these concerns over prices and meeting domestic targets, but I think it's also to be aware that states operate on a realist paradigm, and they have their own state imperatives to look after their own economies and society. So that's something that will have to be taken into account when we think about what energy system will develop. We know that Norway has tremendous potential to contribute to Europe's decarbonisation, but there is now a lack of projects scheduled, and there's a significant risk that this starts to fall further behind. And this disconnect is a huge part of this. And Europe and North Sea states are starting to appreciate this and look to alternate solutions. And there's a real risk of Norway, I think, losing out to other countries who are prepared to contribute more to Europe's decarbonisation. And just some final thoughts briefly. I think we need to show what happens to energy prices if there's really extreme situations with no wind or rain. And I think that will help the Norwegian case. I think we need to challenge ideas on interconnection to explain how they're beneficial to industry in the medium and long run, and also to talk about how it can't be an assumption that these prices will necessarily go up. They may well go up, but prove to lower over time. And we need a balanced approach that acknowledges concerns that's not rooted in dismissing these imperatives. And we also need to explore how to better financially compensate Norwegian operators and society for contributing to Europe. Currently, there's not enough incentives, and there's high taxes on hydropower for operators and huge rents on lines. So I hope I didn't speak so fast, but that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have a brief reaction on the same theme from Arne Aamodt at Lyse.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me in the Netherlands and other places.
Perfect.
Okay. Interconnectors from Europe to Norway's well-regulated hydropower system plays today an important role in Northern Europe and can also play an important role in the years and decades to come. And we have to know that Norway's hydro storages is close to 50% of the total hydro storage in Europe. A significant increase in transmission capacity between Norway and Europe is, of course, possible. Maybe a double, maybe a triple of current interconnector capacity. It's technically feasible, but there are different barriers that we have to deal with. First of all, we have to understand that the Norwegian energy system is more or less totally based on electricity for heating, for cooking, for hot water in our homes. Electricity prices in Norway is very important to more or less everyone, due to the fact that we use more electricity in our homes than anyone else on the planet. And there are also this political aspect that Benjamin talked about. There seems to be more and more people that are skeptic to more interconnectors. What will Norway actually gain having an increased interconnector capacity? What will be the environmental aspect of constructing new hydropower stations for pump or for higher installed capacity? What will be the impact on our metallurgic sector? Will new interconnectors increase the energy price in Norway significantly, making the metallurgic sector unprofitable? Different reports saying that the price effect is quite limited, but what we have seen the last year is a significant increase in energy prices. What are the environmental impacts on rapid changes in our hydro reservoirs, increased erosion in the lakes, influence on secure ice in wintertime, biodiversity, etc. And of course, we have to focus on what is the investment risk for the power companies that want to maybe make new hydro projects. But I think also that there are not only barriers, there could be possibilities. Could we have a process in Norway that is well planned and coordinated, making sure that we realize the best new hydro projects first, all considerations taken into account, with a given and fixed profitability? This could reduce political risk and investment risk and giving good society for all parts involved. And this is more or less the way that the Norwegian gas field in the Northern Sea was developed and made its way to market some decades ago. Another solution is giving Norway sufficient economic profit to gain from providing new large-scale capacity services to Norway. Maybe we should have a different pricing on the interconnectors, maybe what we had some years ago at the SK4 interconnectors. So maybe there are ways forward. Thank you.